Hello. I'd like to show you how I make apple cider vinegar. It might be something that you've never considered making before, but you can make it out of scraps in your kitchen. So I like to, my inner homesteader really likes to not waste and make things out of what I already have going. So what we do each fall is we go to an apple orchard, so we end up making applesauce. We have the peeler core device. So we end up with a whole bunch of apple peels and apple cores at the same time, which encourages us to make apple cider vinegar. If you don't have a bulk of apples or apple peels all at the same time, then what you can do is just store your apple peels or your apple cores in your freezer so that they're not getting old. And what we do with our kids is grab an apple and slice it up, and then no one's eaten off the core. So I threw some cores in the jar, in the freezer, and they're just waiting to turn into apple cider vinegar when I'm ready to do that project. So this is something you can easily do without planning ahead. Just throw the jar in there. So you can use just the cores if they're not organic. Or if they're organic, you can use cores and peels to make. So what you'll need to make apple cider vinegar, and with all the ferments, essentially, it's a really similar list. You're either going to have salt or sugar. You're going to have water and a jar and a lid. So for apple cider vinegar, it's sugar that we use instead of salt. So I use an organic fair trade sugar. And then for water is your other thing. You're just going to want good, clean, filtered water. So if you can buy distilled water at the store, or however you get your water as clean as possible, you don't want it to be chlorinated and all that. So, and then jars. Your jars need to be sterilized, so put it through the dishwasher. Give it a good visual inspection to make sure there's no chunks or anything, nothing attached to it. And then I like to just pour a little boiling water in the jar, swish it around, dump it out, and just let it air dry and sit out for a minute. And then I know that there's nothing going on in that jar that we don't want, because fermentation is a process with bacteria. And so we just want the good bacteria. We don't want anything else in our jar. So if you ever have a ferment go bad, by the way, you will know, because your taste buds and your nose are really fantastic indicators of if something has spoiled or not. And your visual inspections, if something got moldy. So I have pretty good luck with that method of sterilization. And I just always make sure, wash my hands really well and clean my area before I get started. So I'm going to show you how I do this today. I already have a big batch that is halfway through at another stage. So what we do is we're going to fill a jar 3/4 of the way full with our apple cores, or our peels as well if they're organic. And then separately we will mix up, and you might want to write this down if you're going to make this, 1 tablespoon of sugar per 1 cup of water. So you'll just mix up a batch. I love jars because they can handle the boiling water, they can handle the heat, they have measurings right on them. So this is, 3 cups of water, so you would add the 3 tablespoons of sugar to this. Dissolve your 3 tablespoons of sugar in some boiling water, get that nice and dissolved, and then you can add some good clean room temperature water to cool that off so that it's ready to be part of your apple cider vinegar. And obviously I would let the apple cores sit out for a little bit and thaw a bit before I use them for my ferment. So you're just going to dump, I know I like to pretend sometimes to make it simpler to show you. You're just going to dump your sugar water over your apple cores, and this is 3/4 full of apple cores. And then when you pour your water in, I can't tell you exactly how much, because obviously that's dependent on how much space is between your cores and exactly what you have going on. So the recipe is a little, you just have to wing it. You don't want to fill it up all the way. Sometimes I make the mistake of filling up a ferment too far, and then when it gets really active and fermenting and going, it'll spill over. So if you're gonna leave your ferment on a nice piece of furniture or in your cupboard where it could get other things sticky, maybe put a little plate or a tray underneath anything you're fermenting. This can sit with your other ferments. I am pretty sure from what I have learned that kombucha is the main ferment that doesn't want to be next to anything else fermenting. But apple cider vinegar I think should be fine. So you're gonna cover it like I did here. This was the jar I used to make my batch. I like to go big. So this is bigger than my gallon size jar. Maybe this is 1.5 gallons. See, there's no exact. I'm just winging it. So I like to cover with these rubber band and coffee filter. So I use this because I do reuse them sometimes. They get a little ripped up, and I just make sure that there's no holes that any kind of bacteria or foreign things can make their way into my ferment. So I just want to make sure it's safe and nothing's going to get in. So this is how I cover them up and make sure it's all sealed up well. So you're just going to set it out of sunlight with your, it's going to be like this, with your apple cores and your water. You're going to put it out of sunlight for about 2 weeks. So here's the trick. Here's where you have options. You want the cores, they're going to want to float. You want them to stay in the water. With any ferment, this is kind of your tricky spot, is everything that is above the liquid could grow mold. And so if you check on it, which you check your ferments often, if you check on a ferment and you do see something moldy, you need to remove that. And then just kind of keep a close eye on if things are going to go well from there on out. So the trick to not having anything go bad is to keep the apple cores under the liquid so that the air is not touching them. There's a couple options depending on what size jar and what opening. I always, not always, never mind, scratch that. I don't always use wide mouth. So for example, this jar has a pretty nice sized opening. So one of the things that you can use to weight down your cores, or cores and peels, is you can just use a small jar. So I will go through the same process of sterilizing this jar and make sure you're not introducing any bad bacteria. And then you can use this jar to weigh down. See, it'll fit right in there. You can use it to weigh down your cores. Obviously, if you used a jar of this size in this little guy, you would need to leave a lot more space. So I guess that's one of the reasons why I like to use bigger jars and just make more at one time. So you can use this by inserting it, and then it's going to hold the cores down. So that's a choice of weighting down. I also might use a dish like this. Notice I'm always choosing glass. That's because bamboos and woods and plastics and those kind of things, they can have grooves or absorbency, and they can hold something in there. No matter how clean you think it is, there can be any kind of foreign object or bacteria or something that you don't want to introduce. So we also never choose metal when we do ferments because it doesn't like it. We just no metal. So here's another option if you want to go purchasing something for, which I kind of like these. These are fermentation weights. So I think just one of the companies that makes mason jars, Kerr jar, any of the different kinds of ball, maybe made this one, I can't remember. But they will sell different sizes of weights. So that's what these are called. You can Google that, see if you find one you like. For me, this has been a really good investment. In this nice big jar, I used 2 of these and just kind of strategically placed them right inside, and they held down the apple cores for me. So your other option, if you're not going to weight it down, is to stir. So each day you can stir your apple cider vinegar. I didn't want to do that, so I went the other route and it worked out great. But that's your choice, whatever works better for you. And if halfway through you realize, oh, this stirring is no good, I want to add glass, or oh, this glass isn't holding it down properly, I'm going to take it out and stir. Usually this kind of process is fairly forgivable, so you can wing it. Another thing you can do if you, at the store, if there is raw, unpasteurized, so it's not been cooked, the bacteria hasn't been killed, apple cider vinegar at the store, I like to go organic, unpasteurized, unfiltered, so it says 5% acidity with the mother. So if you have some of this already on your shelf, which is great because I will use this jar to refill too. So I like already buying something from the store that has the words on it so I know what's in the jar. But if you have some of this, you can add a splash in the beginning too, just as sort of what we call a starter, which is just a little bit of a finished product of what you're making so that you're introducing the right bacteria from the beginning. So I did add a little splash of the store-bought raw unfiltered apple cider vinegar when I started mine. So what did I do? When I say started mine, I set it out of the sun and in an area that's about 70 degrees or as close to room temperature as you can get. And I let it sit for 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, it smelled like I wanted to eat it. It smelled a little bit sour and sweet and really good. So that's when I know that the apple cores are done being in there. So what you do at that point, which actually, I'll be honest, I tried to make a video of that point in the process, and I made a big mess. So I decided just to redo this today because it feels right. So what I did when I made a big mess, because I underestimated the amount of apple cores and the amount of apple cider vinegar that it created, is you're just going to use a fine mesh strainer, and yes, it is metal, and that's the only metal I use in my fermentation process is my metal fine mesh strainers, and it just goes through real quick, so it's not affecting things, I guess. So far, so good. So you just strain out all the chunks, and if you have chickens, that's great to feed your chickens, or put in your garden compost. And then what you have left is just this lovely liquid that is not quite ready to be apple cider vinegar for you yet. So this is just going to sit and finish with no chunks in it at all. We just have our liquid, and it's just going to sit for 2 to 4 weeks. And I'm just going to keep checking on it, giving it a smell test, and when it's really good and sour and smells like the store-bought vinegar, or better, I hope, then it will be ready to use. And then I will just bottle it up, and like I said, I'll probably just refill this puppy since it already says apple cider vinegar on it and has a handy little pour spout top. And when you're done with the ferment, you know, even when it sits on your counter, it'll still be fermenting a bit, which is cool. So the longer you have your vinegar sitting there waiting to be added to your cooking or your salad dressings or whatever it is you use it for, it'll continue. So always have an awareness if your ferments are even in the fridge or sitting out at room temperature. If you do have a tight lid on, you might just want to burp it. Just loosen it up and allow some of the air to come out every once in a while, or else it can really build a lot of pressure and want to maybe make a mess. So apple cider vinegar, why are you making it? I'll just say real quick before we end here, it's from what I researched, it is high in phosphorus, magnesium, potassium, calcium. Always dilute it when you use it. So if you're going to use it topically, look up, you know, how much to dilute it. And then maybe if you dilute it with water to use topically on eczema or something like that, keep it in the fridge. If you're going to drink it, you know, that's a common thing just to add with your glass of water. Just add a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar to your water and drink that before a meal. That can help with digestion. It helps with, let's see, I made a little list here. Fight candida, lower blood pressure, use as a facial toner, restore your body's pH, that's huge. Add it to your bath water, use it for dandruff, eczema, sunburn, make fire cider if anyone in your family has a cold, kills bacteria and funguses, if you have anything funky going on in your family, heartburn, weight loss, detox, apparently the list goes on and on, so this is a priceless skill to add if your family eats apples and has just about any ailment.